You are listening to Love Your Practice with Dr. Laura Mock. I'm a general dentist, a practice owner, and a certified life coach. I teach women who own dental practices to lead with intention and literally fall in love with their businesses. Keep listening and you will see how learning to love your practice turns into loving your life too. Hello and welcome to another episode of my podcast, Love Your Practice. I'm Dr. Laura Mock, and today I had an amazing interview with a wonderful woman named Jodie Pearson. And Jodie is what she calls a conversionologist. And let me just explain what I mean by that. Basically, she has been in dentistry in so many different roles, including management and assisting and consulting, and she has learned the soft skill of communication, whether it be with our employees or with our patients. And we're just really focusing on leadership this year and vision and really getting our minds straight about who we are as leaders. And I found that Jodie had a very unique and wonderful story to tell with examples of how we can lead our people better. So I hope that you enjoy this fascinating conversation with Jodie Pearson. And as always, I'll see you on the other side. Have a wonderful day. Okay, I would like to welcome to our program Jodie Pearson. Jodie, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Laura. It's a pleasure. I'm all about what you're all about, and I want to lift each other up and women in dentistry.
Yeah, so you and I met in a course a week or two ago, and it was just very obvious we're aligned when we started talking. And I discovered that you have a rich amount of experience that I think can really improve the understanding in the lives of female dental practice owners. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah. So why don't you start? So the reason that we're having you on is because you have a lot of experience managing dental employees, right? And you were telling me about some of the lessons that you have learned over the years of being that manager. And so what I want to hear from you is kind of like, let's start with what you thought it was going to be like. So go back in your mind to when you got promoted to being a manager. What were your expectations and what did you find out about managing dental employees?
Well, the first thing that I thought was, oh, how fun. I'm going to be able to, teach people how to be successful, how to get that patient to show up. And I would be more in charge of or aligned with mentoring, where before that, I was just, I want to say on the same level playing field as they were. We were all doing our own thing, but I wasn't really responsible for, holding them accountable for things as a manager would and should. So changing from that type of position to being a manager, I thought, oh gosh, this will be fun. I'll be able to say, hey, let's go sit down and let's talk about, how you can improve on this, way you word this and that and the other thing. And honestly, it didn't work out that way. What ended up happening is that I was once like a peer, and now they kind of shut me out because I was now different. I wasn't necessarily somebody to go have lunch with anymore. And everything shifted around, and nobody told me that that was going to happen or anything. So I was really kind of thrown into this idea that I didn't quite understand how it was going to work. And it was very, very uncomfortable, especially when I knew that things needed to be improved upon. And I didn't have that doorway to go through. It just was not open to me or to them because nobody really understood.
Yeah. So I'm just going to like coach speak that for a second, because what I want to do is kind of get into your brain and explain using our understanding of how brains work, why that was so uncomfortable for you. Because we have this need as humans, and our brains recognize this need as sort of like an evolutionarily beneficial thing for us to be a part of our pack. Okay. So we're in the pack and everything's going great. And then you get promoted to be a leader of the pack. And what we find out is being the leader is lonely.
And
And all of a sudden we're getting these cues, and our data is coming in and we're getting cues that our brain is interpreting as you're in danger of not being in the pack anymore. And so that feels terrible because your brain is trying to get you to do what it thinks is good for your survival. And it's seeing these hints that you're not in the pack. And so every time you see people going out to lunch with you without you, or getting together outside of dental, or having their little side conversations, your brain doesn't like those things.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better, Laura.
Mhm.
The way you interpreted what I just said is really amazing. And that's what I love about and appreciate about you.
Mm-hmm. It's just so nice to be able to put it into context and understand why it's uncomfortable. And for
Right.
anybody who's listening right now, I just want you guys to know, I know that when you own a dental practice and you're the leader, it can be very isolating. And I just want you to know it's not necessarily because your employees don't believe in you and love your leadership. It's just we get ourselves into a position that our brain doesn't like. Yeah, we can handle it, especially if we put it into perspective. But that's one of the things that I learned that was kind of uncomfortable too. Like, I honestly thought that my employees would be sort of like my sisters or my best friends, and I love my employees so much. I care about each of them, but I'm not in their club,
Right.
and that's okay.
Right. That's good. Yeah. And yes, a sense of loneliness and separation
Mhm.
definitely took place. And
Yeah.
and I learned later, as you did, that I needed to be coached. I needed to learn how to do that. Now, not everybody's like that, but I'm kind of an emotional person. I like to be liked, if I can say that. And it's important to me that people want to be around me and enjoy my company.
Mhm.
And that when that gets separated, it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I kind of get this extrovert vibe from you, like really extrovert. Am I right? Do you like
I
to be
am,
out and making
yes,
friends and
glad to be involved.
asking
But I don't
questions?
have a lot. I just have certain people. But my vibe is, yes, I want to connect. I actually, one of my Clifton strengths, the first one is connectiveness.
Oh, I love that.
So I do want to connect. So when I feel disconnected, guess what? So
Hmm.
that's something that you as a coach would certainly be able to walk me through. You know,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
just
What else did you find challenging when you first started being a manager instead of a part of the club?
well, when it came time to actually, someone's on their cell phone a lot, and that goes against the policy, and it's not fair to the other employees.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was just working with a client the other day who I was supposed to set time aside to work with me, and she said, "Oh God, the phone's ringing, and so is on the other line on the phone with her son."
Mm-hmm.
That's so uncomfortable for the team the member. I could hear it in her voice that she was feeling deflated, that she wasn't feeling supported by her team because she needed to work with me on some things. And I felt the whole sense of it from her. So it's super important that everybody needs to know what the policies are and to be held accountable for the policies. And so that was the hardest thing for me, is to say, hey, you can't really be on your cell phone during work hours, or unless it's an emergency and so forth, because I just didn't really know how to express that. I didn't have the tools or the paperwork, which I later learned how to use, to
Mm-hmm.
express that and support everybody on the team in the same way.
Yeah. And so what you're telling me is that you ran into a situation, and probably cell phones is an example of it, but there were probably others too, where there was a situation where the productivity was being compromised by employees either misunderstanding or disregard. to what the policy was, or maybe a lack of policy at first. I don't know. I mean, I sometimes run
Right.
into a lack of clear
Correct.
definitions of
Correct.
what's expected and what's not. And it's funny because as a leader, I think to myself, well, I shouldn't have too many rules and I want them to like me. So I'm going to leave it vague so that, and that's what my brain is telling me. But actually, what I've learned as a leadership coach is that clear is kind.
Mm-hmm.
The more clear you are, the more obvious you make it about what you expect. It's easier for the employees to know what they're supposed to do to be successful and make you happy.
Right. No one should be guessing what is going on. And that's something I learned when I was hired in a certain position. And when I was hired, my employer said, you should never feel surprised if we have a conversation about something that I expected from you and that isn't happening. I may call you in as a reminder, but there's not a good chance that you're going to be surprised because I will lay out my expectations to you. So if I need to call you in, you'll know that I'm referring back to that expectation. So clear communication, documentation, and having things in writing is critical, and it's just an easier path to communication. And so we'll talk about that when you're ready.
Yeah. So give me an example of how you tried to correct an employee's behavior when you were a newbie manager before you learned about this way of being clear and documenting things. So give me an example of how you would say now not to do it.
How I would have said then or how I would have said now?
How you did it before that
Okay.
you wouldn't do now.
So first thing that happened is the feeling. Okay. The feeling of, oh God, I have to tell her you're not supposed to be on your phone. How do I communicate that? So the feeling of confidence just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So that's where it started. And so obviously, because I wasn't feeling right or comfortable with it, it's not going to come across well. It's just not. It's going to come out wrong, So, so how I would do it was I would, after the phone call ended, I would call so-and-so in and say, hey, we really shouldn't be on the phone during work hours. Okay. And that was it. So that really is not effective. It sort of come across as my opinion, maybe, or, we really shouldn't do that. So you probably shouldn't do that. So it was just a very weak way to communicate. And then I was left feeling worse.
Right.
And ineffective.
Okay, so this is the perfect example. Thank you so much for that little story because it fits so well into how I coach my ladies to lead. Because basically, so our thoughts create our emotions and our emotions drive our action, right? And your thought was, oh God, here we go. I got to correct her. And that made you feel, what did you say?
Inadequate.
Inadequate.
I didn't have the confidence. And in the end, I felt even worse because I felt like I failed at what I was supposed to do.
Right. And when you felt inadequate, then when it was time to make the correction, you were kind of apologetic and not real specific and just.
And guess what? The next time it came up, those feelings came back.
Yes.
So I would start procrastinating.
Yeah, so let's put this off. I don't really want to do it. So that would also be in your action column from the inadequacy feeling. You put off correcting the employees. And I will tell you right now, women who work in dental offices as a whole are very socially intelligent. So if they see you feeling inadequate, they're going to pick up on that and know that it's really not that strong of a policy. And, if I need to, then maybe I'll get it out, the cell phone out or whatever. So that's like, thank you for telling that story because it fits in perfectly with my model. And actually that reminds me, I have a guide for how to correct your employees with gratitude. And it goes into this this watching your own feelings first before you pull your employee in. So if there's anybody listening that wants that guide, just send me an email, Dr. Laura Mock, dds@gmail.com, and I can send you the guide for how to correct your employees. All right. So back to Jodie.
So I want to just add to the end of that, when you procrastinate, what happens? It just builds in the stress. And then
Yes.
eventually you start losing sleep because you haven't done what you should have done. It's going to keep going on. It's just like a vicious circle.
Mhm. Yep. And you never get rid of that inadequate feeling because now you see that you've been procrastinating it.
Mhm.
So it's like proof that you're right, that you can't do it.
Right. And then another issue comes up, someone's late. So now you have that one on top of this one. So
Mhm.
it's really important to get on it right away when it happens so that it's fresh in the employee's mind, it's fresh in our mind. And this emotional, uh, not being confident, it just ruins everything on it.
So how did you learn to do it right, Jodie? Was it trial and error? Did you take a class? Teach us.
Yes, please. I actually got some work for coaching from an HR specialist.
Okay.
And the HR specialist would talk me through every scenario. I mean, I was like a little baby. I would say, well, she did this and she said that. And, okay, Jodie, this is what you do. So the first thing I learned was that you have to have a clean, clear job description. What is expected of that person? And when you become, like, let's say that for myself, when I became a manager, the first thing that I should have done was had one-on-one meetings with each and every employee that I was managing to go over their job description and make sure that they understood what was being expected of them. Because lo and behold, they'll say, well, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Or I don't really know how to do that. And so that is setting yourselves up for success. Getting to know your employee versus the job description, finding out where they need to be coached. And in the long run, this kind of definitely reduces the odds for them to not meet the expectations. And then, of course, if they don't, you have that to refer back to. So my favorite thing about having that piece of information was it took me out of it. Like, it's not me. It's the job. It's what the job requires to make this business a success. So I was able to take myself out as a manager, so to speak, and I put myself in as a coach. More like, okay, let's sit down and review this together. Let's see how I can help you. And the other piece of information, Laura, was the office policy. So you have a job description, which is very specific and unique to the actual job. And then you have the office policy, which is going to talk about tardy and attendance and cell phones and all of that sort of thing. So you have both of those pieces of documents or to refer back to. And I would pull them out and give them a copy and say, hey, let's go over these things together. This is a reminder that, that we don't want to get on the cell phone, internet, and things like that. If it's an emergency, please let me know. Just come on over and say, I have to take this call. My daughter, such and such. I have no problem with that. Okay. Yeah. But if it's abused, then you have the policy to refer back to. Now, the third piece is that you have documentation in terms of there are some steps that you can follow, which are start with a verbal coaching, right? Now, the verbal coaching is just, hey, I think I got called in one time I made a mistake and I emailed something with PHI. And I told on myself, I go, oh, I just emailed something and it had PHI and it was outside of the company. And so the IT director and the CEO called me in and said, Jodie, this isn't a bad thing, but, we know that this happened and we just want to make sure you understand this shouldn't happen. They're going to tell me what I already know. And what I learned was that that's their job.
Yeah.
So that's really important for me as an employee to understand, well, that's their job. They know I already know that. They already know I made a mistake, but their job is to document it, that they did, just double check and make sure I understood it. So that's something that you can go in with is, hey, I just want to double check. I'm pretty sure you already know this, but, the office, and I would always make sure that I have a copy of what I'm talking about because it's in writing right there. And the job description, when you review that with them, they will take, you need to give your employees time to sit down in a corner somewhere and read it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we don't provide to our employees, is the time to really let things sink in, let them develop their questions and so forth. So that and the office policy, both, they need to have a half an hour, however much time, close the door and let them read it. And please come back to me with any questions that you might have. And that's a continuation of the same meeting. And then they sign both of those documents and they go in the employee file.
So when you got called in by your manager, I just love this because it's another example of how kindness means being clear. And when you pull an employee aside, we don't have to feel guilty or sorry or inadequate when we are able to say to ourselves, this isn't me being mean, this is me showing them what's expected. And when you change your thoughts about what you're doing, then you can feel confident and do the correction in a way that's better for the employee and certainly feels better to the manager too.
And ultimately, I learned that my job was to, I'm going to go back to the HR really quickly because,
Okay.
I had a full job. I had a 40-hour-a-week job, and now I have to babysit. That's kind of how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, what a hassle. Can't this person just stay off their cell phone because it's repeating and now I have to do this again. So
Yeah.
it felt like it was pulling me away from all the things that I love to do and that I'd shined at, like dentists would love to make your smile beautiful. But now in the back of your mind, you're going to have to call Sally in and coach her, and that just drags you down. So the point for me was, and when I went to HR, I said, it's keeping me from doing my job. And she looked at me and she said, Jodie, that is your job.
I love that.
Just like that. And I went,
Oh.
Okay, I need to get this, figure out how to do both.
Yeah.
So, that being said, I kind of forgot where I was there. What was your last question?
I don't remember either. But while you were talking, it reminded me of a thought that my clients and I play around with a lot, because we're crafting thoughts in our mastermind. We're thinking of ways that we want to think about something. And one thing that we say to ourselves a lot is, I'm creating a practice that I want to work in. And that makes a feeling of maybe excitement or anticipation, maybe hopefulness. And it helps me and my ladies do the things that maybe we would have procrastinated before, like correcting our employees, because we want to create that thing where we walk in every day and we just love it. And we don't have to resent doing any correction because it's just part of what we do, because we've created a practice that we want to work in.
And a system for that.
And you have to have a system. Yes.
Again, it just took all the emotion out of it. I want to retract that. The only emotion I had remaining was, I'm going to call so-and-so in today. I'm going to help them.
Yeah. So what would be the name of that emotion, Jodie? Because you just gave me a thought. But when you think to yourself, I'm going to call them in and I'm going to help them, what does that feel like? What's a one-word name of that emotion? Is it helpful?
That emotion is, one word, lead.
Lead?
Lead. The reason
I'm leading. Mm-hmm.
Lead them to success.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're, being late is going to affect your teammates this way.
Yep.
That's not necessarily in the policy, but you get to interpret the policy in a way that is on your heart and you want your practice to honor, your people to honor. So I would say, what can we do about that? Is there something that you can do about that? And always, there's always that question in every conversation, no matter what it is, if it's cell phone or whatever it is. So what do you think you can do about that? And let them decide. And what they might say is, I'll make sure that my cell phone is off between, unless I'm on break.
Yeah.
Hey, what a great idea. See, so they're offering their own solution. I'm asking them to give me a solution. So I'm not making up a solution. So for example, what difference would it be if I said, why don't you turn your cell phone off between breaks? How would that be?
Well, then you get objections instead of.
Come across well. So anything that comes up, we want to say, what can I do to help? Or what can you do about the situation? So let's say that, well, I didn't know that, I didn't know how to handle that collection call.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say the employee got upset and maybe, went off on the patient, and you kind of could tell, you don't want them to be spoken to that way.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to call them and say, hey, I overheard and observed. This is just a talk, not necessarily a coaching, but something you definitely don't want your patients to hear. So we can give them some different words to use, give them some training, but you have to be able to give them time to learn. Sometimes just saying, do it this way is not enough. There's a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different steps. So I think that one of the things that we lack as leaders in the dental office is providing the employee time to learn. Time to learn. They're just kind of thrown in a lot of times, and then you're like backpedaling. So it's just really important that they're given the time. And I needed the time to learn how to manage. I needed the time. I wasn't able to just boom, turn around and do it. There were steps involved. There were different scenarios involved. And I was able to go and give every single scenario, how do I word this? How would, but they're going to say this in my mind. If I say this, they're going to say that. How do I get over that?
Yeah. So this brings up a point that I want to make that I have learned over the years is so important. I have owned my dental practice now for 13 years. And I know, yay! When I first bought it, I thought that it was the most productive to have my employees generating fees all the time that they were in there. All the time that they were at work, they needed to be delivering patient care. Okay. And what I learned over time is that we need time to develop our systems, to practice how we talk to patients, to talk to each other about problems that we've had in the week or the month and how we want to address it in the future. And what I learned is this development time is vital.
Yes.
Or you just create a practice that bends to this or it bends to that, and it becomes, how do I say this? Those dancing men that are in front of the car lots with the wind, and it's kind of shaking around. And so, the patient calls and they say, I just want my free cleaning, or the employee comes in and they say, I want to leave early because my kid has a soccer game. And the owner becomes this, or the manager becomes this blowy man thing, what I'm talking about. And in order to become a ship that's going in one direction, you have to stop seeing patients sometimes, because you cannot make plans and improve things when you have a human in your chair who's trying to deal with the fact that you're going to drill on their teeth. So you send the patients home, lock the door, turn off the phones, and talk about how the practice runs.
Something that comes to mind when you say that, Laura, is there's a book out there called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I believe that's the name of it. So men, and in the book, the main context is that men compartmentalize. I'm not going to say that's true for everybody, but this is kind of the idea of the book. And so men will have one thought, and then they'll finish that thought, and then they'll jump into the next box. So let's say that you have like a big box with all these little boxes in it, and they'll just jump into that box, and that's all they're thinking about.
Yep.
What's in that box. Now, women are more like spaghetti. where they're in one box, but they have all this other stuff going on from all these other boxes in their head. So what I learned from that is like you said, it's very important to stop doing dentistry, get into a different box,
Yes.
and focus on that. And that's what I love about team meetings. Team meetings is because let's say you have a new system that you want to implement. Everybody says, okay, great. Anytime that you start a new system, when it goes live, there are going to be questions. It's just not going to be black and white. So it's an ongoing, living, breathing thing, every system that you have. And you want to have an open door policy where or office team members can count on the fact that, I'm going to write this down and I'm going to bring this up at our meeting that's coming up. If it's something that can wait. So being able to look forward to being able to vent or bring up their own idea or this scenario, what do we do if that happens? Because it's always changing, like I call it a living, breathing thing. So those, and then employee activities are crazy good. I mean, here's a good example. And I'm talking about team morale. I know I'm getting a little off topic. Is that okay?
No, I would love to hear some ideas for team morale building, because I think we could use that in our office too. And, like I said, we get so focused on patient care that we forget about the humans who are helping us with that. Right. And they have feelings too. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Team morale is really, I think, the foundation to everything. If we have a good team camaraderie, everyone is more willing to listen to each other. They're more willing to make changes about what's happening. They're not so defensive, maybe. So a schedule of team activities is super important, and that can actually take the place of a team meeting. Business about let's improve on that. Hey, once a month, if we have weekly team meeting, once a month we're going to just play a game.
Yeah,
we're just going to play a game. And like a game could be, you could Google them or whatever, but I'm sure the team can come up. There's going to be team members who go, oh yeah, I have a dice game that I want us to play. And I have this, let's play dictionary or whatever. And one of them is like, tell the truth, or are you lying or telling the truth? So you say 3 things and 2 of them are the truth and 1 of them is a lie. And the team has to guess which one is the lie. I climbed Mount Whitney. I've been in dental for 35 years. I have 12 kids, whatever it is. And then they get to pick. It's just for fun. And then you learn, I didn't know you did that, I didn't know you did river rafting. Oh, who knew? So it's just really fun to have, definitely put aside time for that.
Another thing that I like to do, this is one thing that I am good at, is taking my team out of town for team meetings. I mean, for example, I'm speaking at the Happy Dentist Retreat this summer, which, by the way, if you're listening, it's thehappydentistretreat.com if you want to look into it. It's at a resort outside of Columbus, Ohio, and there's going to be yoga and comedy and wine tasting and CE. And I'm taking my team to that and I'm speaking at it. So if you want to meet me live, that would be a fun way to meet. But we've gone to the best seminar ever in Las Vegas. We've gone to several Blatchford seminars. And one time we went to the ADA meeting when it was in Hawaii. We set a goal and they totally rocked it. And then we all went to Hawaii together. So yeah, so that type of thing is wonderful.
Listening to you say that, my heart of hearts, if I were a dentist, I would be like, I wish I could do that. That sounds like so enriching for my team. I wish I could do that. And Laura, I went to your last webinar, and just learning from that, for me, I mean, you're helping female dentists, but you're helping people. And so I did a little worksheet of my own.
You did?
Yeah. I private messaged it to you. You have to look at it and see if I got it. I think I could tweak it, but I private messaged it to you. But your thing is that, I wish I could do that for my team. And everything that you're about, in my opinion, is to get them to that point, to get us all to that point. What is keeping us from getting there? And let's understand why that's happening to you that's keeping you from getting there. So yeah, that's really neat. Yeah, I've been on team trips before. It's just
It's,
a whole different feeling. You learn
so
so much about each other
you
outside.
really do. And you're outside of all of your responsibilities. There's no suction to clean, there's no patients to call. There's just downtime together and maybe learning a new skill together too. It's great. But
You have
okay,
another
so
team. Mhm.
that made me think of two things I want to say. First of all, thank you for coming to my webinar. And my mission is to help these women who own dental practices have the life, have the feelings that they've worked for and deserve, but they're running into problems with their brain and they don't realize it. So I'm trying to get that message out that they can enjoy what they have right now. And then the other one is, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I wish I could take my team to Hawaii. My team totally paid for that trip on their own because I did the math with the goal that we set. We set a goal to start, I think it was 30 Invisalign cases. And I made sure that the lab costs were accounted for. And they literally started those Invisalign cases and it got the fees for that. And that's what paid for our trip to Hawaii. So if you want to take your team on a trip, you can set it up. It just takes a spreadsheet to figure out how much it's going to cost. You know, what's your profit on this, this, and this. And I became a winner in that too, because we actually got so much better at Invisalign when we did that.
Nice.
Selling it. I mean, I'm still benefiting from that because they all learned how to sell the cases and we're still selling cases, even though we're not saving up for Hawaii anymore.
Mhm. I
So
wanted to go back, if I could, to one thing about team morale. I
yes.
remember when I worked in the dental office. By the way, I've been in the industry 35 years. 20 of those years was in the dental office straight. And I remember the day our practice just kept growing and growing. We were adding associates and we knocked out the wall when the guy next door retired and remodeled. And I was very progressive. And I remember the day that we were told that, oh, we're not going to close for lunch. We're going to, stagger our lunches. And lo and behold, our time together during lunch was dissolved.
Mm.
Laura, I cannot tell you how that affected us. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying you got to have those team activities
Yeah.
to make
Got
up
to
for
have
them.
downtime together to build the strength of the
Yeah.
friendships.
Yeah. And we just kind of became strangers in a way. You know, I used to talk about, oh, I tell Bonnie about my daughter and my husband, all these things, and she would tell me, and we just never had the time to do that anymore. So it's good to have that time set aside.
Well, I'm so glad that we agree on all this stuff. Isn't it fun to talk to someone who agrees with you?
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Let me ask you one more question before we run out of time. I might have listeners right now who are like, I totally agree with Jodie, but I cannot take a bite out of this giant apple. It's like way too big for me to put in my mouth. So what would you say would be an easy way to just get started with maybe clarifying what we expect of our employees? What would you say?
Thing that I would do, I think the easiest thing to do would be to prepare your job description, which I'm sorry, that may not be that easy, but there are plenty of job descriptions out there for different positions that, in fact, I just acquired some from somebody. So Laura, if you want me to share them with you, I'm happy to, and they can just customize them and make them their own.
Yeah, well, and actually they can reach out to you because as we discussed before we started, we're going to put your phone number and your email address in the show notes. So if somebody wants a copy of those job descriptions, they can just email you.
Wonderful. That would be super. And then to give them their job description and give them work time. I don't mean take this home and read it. I'm not in favor of asking employees to do work from home, off the clock. So give them time to sit and read it. Everybody's going to have their own, you're going to work that out where the doctor's covered with the assistant. So this person can take time to read and then sign it and or you want to make sure that they give you any questions that they have. So set up a meeting. It could be like a 15-minute meeting. Each person start out with like a 15-minute. And if it needs to go longer, you'll recognize that. And that's just something that you get to do. You get to meet again with this person, and you kind of want to think of it that way, because if this person is confused and not clear, my job is to help them with that, and answer those questions. So there may be a couple of meetings following that. The other thing is the policy. That's just cut and dried, where you print out that policy, give them time in a closed door environment alone to read the policy, and then they sign it and return it to you. However, make sure that they know that if they have any questions to let you know. That doesn't necessarily need to have another meeting to it.
Do you have any suggestions of ways to make office policies? I mean, to make it in a way that's clear and also is in line with your state employment laws, and in a way that the employees can read it well? I mean, where do you even start?
Well, I would refer anybody to Ben Erickson, if that's okay. Ben Erickson is a HR specialist and a company.
I actually interviewed, oh gosh, now I can't remember her name. The part owner of Ben Erickson on my podcast, like 10 or 12 episodes ago.
Rebecca Boatman.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, but yeah,
I don't think that
you did that is really helpful. So everybody, you need to go back and look up that.
Yeah. I'll put it in the show notes, which episode it is. But yeah, that was a really good episode. We talked about excellent communication with your employees. And that was one that I wouldn't want to miss if I own a dental practice.
And, investing the time. You have to take time for yourself and invest in yourself. And when we get overwhelmed, we just can't think straight. I mean, if I'm overwhelmed and my employer says, what are you doing today? My brain has been so spaghetti today. I would have to actually make a list, think about it and make a list, because everything is just being thrown at me. So we have to consciously, like watching this podcast or anything to learn, we have to commit to investing in ourselves.
Yes. And let me, I want to add one thing to that. I totally agree. You have to have time to create these things. And I would propose that it doesn't mean that the owner works more hours. Ladies, set aside time. You will not lose money from setting aside some of your work hours to lead your practice. Those hours are precious, and they will only pay you more as you improve.
Emotionally pay.
Yes.
I mean, if you get yourself aligned with your confidence in those areas, man, the sky is the limit.
Feels so much better.
The investment of time and whatever it might cost to get that coaching is going to return to you so many more times. So we just get so overwhelmed, and we just, we can't even think straight sometimes.
We can't. And once we're in overwhelm, which is an emotion, we don't take steps to make things better. So we have to recognize, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. What thought is creating this overwhelm for me? It might be, I'm so busy, I can't do that, I'm already overworked. All of those things are not facts. They're thoughts. And since they're thoughts, that means they're voluntary, and we can look at it differently if we want to feel different. Okay, ladies? You can feel differently if you want.
I learned this from Laura the other day because I watched her webinar. Please check out her webinar on that. That is like half an hour or maybe an hour of
almost an hour. Yeah.
Watch it during dinner. This is how you invest in yourself, right? Listen to Laura's webinar and you'll go, bing, seriously, because she outlined that emotion. Why are you having it? Why did I yell at that sales rep? Why did I get all worked up? And then how can I look at it differently?
Yes, and because you're free to do that if you want. Thank you for being my cheerleader. I'm going to keep you in my back pocket all the time.
Yeah, absolutely, Laura. That's why I wanted to join your webinar, to really, really see what you're about. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate I don't know many people that, well, I'm sure there are a lot of life coaches, but I've
There are.
listened to you, and you're specializing in uplifting women in dentistry. That's a specialty in itself, because
Mhm.
like it or not, men and women are different.
Mhm.
And so you're honing in on us, and I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Well, they're my people,
All right.
and I know who my people are. I'm going to help them as much as I can.
Wonderful.
Okay, so just to summarize, we are going to have a way to get a hold of Jodie on the show notes. And also, if you want to get that correction guide from me, my email address will be in the show notes too, so you can email me. And this has been a great 45 minutes, Jodie. I sure appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Thank you for having me, Laura. It was such a pleasure. I'm so glad we met.
Me too. Thank you for listening to Love Your Practice with Dr. Laura Mock. I would love to meet you. To join our movement, find the Facebook group called Love Your Practice and request to join. If you can't find it, just send me a message and I'll add ya. You'll find me there helping all of my ladies to fall in love with their businesses and have a better life.